Welcome to the Angry Habs Fan Podcast Show, Episode 3. I am the Angry Hab Fan, broadcasting to you live from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. It is Sunday, September 25th, 2016. How's everyone doing today? Very busy week in hockey. The World Cup continued. We had the semi-final and very exciting hockey. Last week, during the introduction, I brought up the fact that I was having audio problems. I'm well aware of it, and I was making efforts to try to fix it. And sure enough, I think I made it worse. However, this time, I'm hoping we have found the solution. I am broadcasting to you live from my man cave here in my little office. There's a few things here that make noise that have been shut down. I have a mini fridge. Any respectful man cave should have a mini fridge or a fridge of some sort. So I unplug that. That won't be buzzing anymore. And I also have a pretty decent computer here that I would imagine makes quite a bit of ambient noise. So I turned that off for probably the first time in months. Hopefully that'll cut a lot of the noise out. So let's hope that takes care of a lot of the problems. If not, we will continue to work on it. Nevertheless, I am aware of it. But I'd also like to bring up the fact that last week, just before I broadcasted the last week's episode, a little piece of information in my personal podcasting world, my first episode was flagged by the NHL. And it was flagged for monetization. I believe the reason, and it could only be that reason, was we had, I think, 3 or 4 pictures during the podcast flashing by, and 4 of them were personal pictures of a game between the Habs and Buffalo, and they were flagged as NHL content. And when I saw that, basically I'm a bit of a noob with this whole YouTube thing, so I wasn't quite sure what to do, but basically it tells you what's happened, and it leaves one little button at the bottom saying, I think something along the lines of, you can contest this. And of course, my first impulse was to contest it, because I'm a fighter, and I felt, well, I don't think I'm not making money off this podcast. Why should the NHL? But then I thought about it some more, and, as I thought about it some more, I started to care less and less, and so I'm just leaving it like that. It's a small podcast right now. I don't want to cause any trouble, and I don't really care. So, however, there was a consequence. There's no more slideshow of NHL content. So, unfortunately, that's been terminated. We'll try to think of something else, but until then, that's why you don't have a slideshow anymore. So, in other news, I would also like to point out, anyone who's willing to leave a comment or has a question, please do so. I'm totally willing to cover it in future podcasts if it's relevant and if it's a good question or a good comment or so on and so forth. I'd love this to be more interactive, and I think that's the easiest way to do it. So don't be shy, and go ahead and say something. And basically, the preseason of the Montreal Canadiens is underway. It just started, the real preseason. We finished up the rookie camp last week during this week that just passed. And the real preseason just started this weekend. And we will be talking a little bit about that. I haven't spoken a lot about Habs preseason up to now because I just feel that the rookie camp, there were 4 or 5 players, and I did bring that up. But really, I just didn't feel there was all that much information in there to put out there. I didn't want to get into the weeds of analyzing players that, quite frankly, we may never even see in a Habs uniform. So with the World Cup going on, I felt there was other news that was probably more Hab relevant for our starting lineup. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. And I also wanted to say that last week's episode was a bit long. It was an hour, which is actually pretty conventional for a podcast, but people did make the comment that it was quite long last week. Sorry. There was that whole Michel Therrien controversy that I covered quite deeply. I had a few things to get off my chest, so I did so. However, I would like to say that it could go an hour again. It might just be a half hour in the future. I have no idea how long this podcast is going to be. To be honest with you, during the week, I thought maybe this podcast might be quite short because apart from the World Cup, and really, that was about it. There wasn't much to cover, but when I actually sat down to do this podcast today, it looks like I might have a pretty decent show going on. So that should pretty much cover us on the intro, and we'll move right into our first segment, which I'm calling Max Pacioretty, Who Else? For captain, that is. Max Pacioretty has had the worst preseason start in his entire career. I think that's safe to say. We covered Max last week in our podcast. We spent a lot of time covering his captaincy, the timeline of it. We covered a lot of the problems in the Montreal Canadiens dressing room last year, especially those tied to perhaps the job of a captain. We also talked about his preseason start this year with the World Cup and Team USA, and let's be quite frank, he's been playing badly. Sure, there are many factors at play here that affect his play that are out of his hands, including his coach, Tortorella. But let's be honest, the only person to blame for bad hockey playing is Max Pacioretty. This week I was a little bit disappointed in a lot of the media coverage. I predicted that the Max Pacioretty defenders would be out in full force, and they certainly did not disappoint. Basically, it's everybody and everything else's fault under the sun, and not Max Pacioretty's. And I completely disagree with that. You know, sure, they make a side remark about how he could play better, but then they spend another 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes talking about how Team USA sucked, Tortorella sucked, they put him in a system he couldn't play well, and, you know, Max Pacioretty often needs help to score goals, and this, that, and the other, and, you know, at some point, you have to look at the player. At some point, not at some point, it should be the first place you look, at least in my opinion. All hockey players are responsible for their play on the ice. Everything around that could be white noise, it could be a distraction, but when the puck is dropped and you play hockey, there is no covering it up. And Max Pacioretty played bad hockey. And Tortorella was completely within his right and continued to do so, to demote Max Pacioretty, to try to get more hockey out of him, and it failed. And as a Montreal Canadiens fan, this is all bad news. Our team needs Max Pacioretty this year. He needs to score goals, he needs to be a good leader, he needs to essentially turn around and make us all forget a horrible last season. And he is going to be a main actor in that if that were to happen. If he starts the season slowly, in a bad mood, because of this bad start, we're going to have a lot of trouble, even with Carey Price in full shape. Max Pacioretty needs to score goals for us, or we're not going to win hockey games. And so I was hoping after last week's podcast that we wouldn't be covering Max Pacioretty, at least for a little bit. I was hoping to put this to bed for a while. I know a lot of this is not his fault. A lot of it squarely belongs in Michel Therrien's big mouth, and we definitely discussed that last week. But nevertheless, he has been in the news, and we have been covering it. And this week, I was sure I wasn't going to talk about him, but of course, during the Team USA, Team Canada game, I noticed something that made me laugh, and I'm sure it made most of Hab Nation laugh on a certain level, was the Logan Couture hit, where Max Pacioretty hit Logan Couture into the boards, and Shea Weber skated over and gave him a piece of his mind, and, you know, because that's what a good leader does when someone puts a questionable hit on one of your players. And I thought to myself, well, isn't this funny? Our new leader giving it to our captain. I mean, nothing really happened. They exchanged a few words, maybe a face wash. I did have a discussions about whether the hit was legal. My opinion, it was completely illegal. It deserved the penalty. I understand Logan Couture turned his back, But in Logan Couture's defense, when you see Max Pacioretty coming at you from behind, 99.999% of the time, he's going to try to poke check you and not hit you. Hitting is not in Max Pacioretty's game, and I think Logan Couture knows that. However, unfortunately for him, he was wrong. That 0.0001% kicked in, and Max is playing badly and decided he was going to expand his game and add hitting to it. And we all saw the result of that. It ended up into a boarding penalty and pretty much a meeting at center ice with Shea Weber. And it made me laugh, but at the same time, Max Pacioretty, it was a bit of a cherry on top of a very sour, bitter cake. When a guy takes a really bad penalty, when he's out there playing on the fourth line, that's the last thing you want to do, and he went and got a bad penalty. So that pretty much encapsulated, in my opinion, Max Pacioretty's performance at the World Cup right there. And so the whole Shea Weber Max Pacioretty incident got me laughing, and I thought, well, here are two leaders, neck to neck here, giving each other hell. And we started musing during the game about, who should be the captain of the Montreal Canadiens. Obviously, Max Pacioretty has been undergoing quite a lot of criticism on that front. And if per se we were to get or pick a new captain, who would it be? And of course there were a few candidates that were obvious. I obviously brought up Brendan Gallagher. I brought him up last week. I think he could have been a great captain. I still think he can. He's the kind of player you're not going to have any leadership issues with. I would have preferred him than Max Pacioretty. We talked about Markov. He's too old. Thomas Plekanec. I mean, captains can't disappear for extended periods of time during when the games count. So we were left with very few options. And quite frankly, when we decided, when I say we, it's me and my friends watching the game, we put Shea Weber and Max Pacioretty neck and neck as the two people that we'd like to see as captain of the Montreal Canadiens. And we're really the only two candidates that we could see doing so. And I lamented the fact that it would have been rather nice if Max Pacioretty had handed over his captaincy almost immediately upon the Shea Weber trade. Say, here comes a guy who is undisputably the leader of going to be the leader of our dressing room. Here's the captaincy, and, I think that would have been a really great move on Max Pacioretty's part for many, many reasons. Now, unfortunately, that did not happen. I understand why it didn't happen. Once a player is chosen captain, he often wants to be captain. If you are captain material, you want to be captain. And so it doesn't surprise me he didn't pass the C, but I would have liked to have seen it. I think Shea Weber, if you take them at equal value, if you will, who is your captain of your team, Shea Weber or Max Pacioretty? I think it's a no-brainer, to be quite frank. It's Shea Weber every time. He's the leader. He's been a leader for 12 years in Nashville. He's been a captain. He plays like a leader on the ice. From what I've seen, at least here in this World Cup, and quite frankly in Nashville, we unfortunately don't get to see them too often, but Shea Weber is always prominent on that team. He is a leader. And Shea Weber would be my pick for captain of the Montreal Canadiens. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think it's going to happen. Frankly, I don't think it's going to happen. It's too late for that to happen. I think it would be a huge mistake if the organization forced Max Pacioretty to give the captaincy to Shea Weber. That would not go over well. But for fun, I started thinking, well, this could be a fun segment for the podcast. Why don't we look at the pros and cons of such a move and just play a little fantasy game of if Shea Weber became captain of the Montreal Canadiens, the pros and cons of such a situation. So let's start with the pros. I think I already discussed it there with the leadership question. Well, that would be put to bed. I don't think anyone in Montreal would question Shea Weber's leadership. I just don't see that happening. However, it's very possible that Max Pacioretty's leadership will be questioned in the future, and it unfortunately could be in the near future for him if he doesn't turn around his hockey. So the leadership question would be put to bed. And after hearing about it for a long time now, it's been at least 6, 7, 8 months, I'm getting a little tired of it. And it's something that should be taken care of. And that way Max Pacioretty can then focus on playing hockey and scoring goals for the Montreal Canadiens. It's no secret being captain of the Montreal Canadiens is a particular job, especially with the pressure and with the media requirements. They often are the people that are gone to for quotes. If something goes wrong, something goes well, they're the face of the club. And I think Shea Weber would be fine in that role. He doesn't speak French. That is an issue in this market. But at the same time, I think most Montreal media, and if not all fans, would be fine with Shea Weber not speaking French. Simply because he is that kind of leader player that no one questions. So the fact that he doesn't speak French probably would be on very few people's minds. Not only that, but as far as I know, Max Pacioretty's French is sketchy at best. So, not really a loss on that front. So those, would definitely be the pros. For this year, I'm really hoping Shea Weber is assigned an assistant. I don't know if they can do a rotation like they've done in past years of assistants to not insult whoever the person who might lose the assistant. But for me, Shea Weber is going to play 25 to 30 minutes of hockey a game for the Montreal Canadiens. He's obviously a leader. He's going to be talking to the refs, whether he's an assistant or not. He's going to probably be taking care of things in the dressing room, whether he's an assistant or not. Let's just give him the assistant and get it over with. And if Max Pacioretty, God forbid, ever gets injured, who's the captain of the Montreal Canadiens? It's Shea Weber in my book. Unfortunately, in my book, it's Shea Weber, but I never know with this organization. I wouldn't be surprised if it fell to Markov or Plekanec or, Michel Therrien has his favorite veterans. They're well reported everywhere, and so you never know with that dressing room and the things that go on there. But at least Weber is enough of a leader that whether he has a C, an A, or nothing on his shirt, he's still going to give it. And that's great news for the Montreal Canadiens. Let's move to the cons. I really don't have much more pros to say about that. The cons, however, are obviously what could be holding this back. I should point out that this move is usually done one of two ways. It's done voluntarily, so there's no real effect on the morale or so on and so forth of a team. Or it's done where the organization forces a player to give up the captaincy. And that's a much more precarious, thorny road, which we'll talk about in the cons, because if Max Pacioretty were forced to give up his captaincy, I'm completely against that. I am only for this if he steps up on his own and nobody pushes him and he just gives it as that move of, you're just a great captain, you go off. If he's forced to do it, I'm against it, because Max Pacioretty is obviously a player who, is affected or could be affected by such a thing. And I don't think Max Pacioretty at this point needs any messing with his mind. He needs to get back onto hockey and be a good captain and be a good goal scorer for the Montreal Canadiens. Now, we'll all see if he could do that this year. I put down that it could cause trouble in the dressing room. Now, ironically, I debated if to put this in a con or a pro. I put it in con because you never want to, upset the dressing room. But at the same time, if the dressing room needs upsetting, then go right ahead. And quite frankly, this could be a pro, because this is the dressing room. The people who caused all these little leadership troubles and didn't like players and this, that, and the other, they're still in that dressing room. They're still there. And if things go south this year for the Montreal Canadiens, we'll start hearing from them again. And those are not the kind of players you want in your dressing room. And unfortunately, I think those are some of the players that Michel Therrien likes to protect. And so we're left in this situation that we are in, where we have a bit of a sour dressing room. Now, Shea Weber, I don't think would put up with that for long. I think regardless of a coach protecting a player, I think Shea Weber, from what I've seen, is the kind of player that would probably take care of it either in a practice or quietly in a hallway and just give him a piece of his mind and tell him to get on the right page and stop his bullshit, if I can be just frank. Because there is bullshit in this dressing room. And it needs to be stopped. Full stop. I don't think Max Pacioretty has the personality to put a stop to that. I think Max Pacioretty, from what I've seen, is a nice guy. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think nice guys could be good captains too. But when there's dissension in a dressing room, I think a nice guy can be a situation where he hampers the team, hampers the situation of solving the problem, where you're trying to take sides and, solve issues by being nice, when really sometimes you just need a fist and tell people to get in line and, enough of it. And I think that's what you have in Shea Weber, and I don't think that's what you have in Max Pacioretty. However, I did put it in the cons. You never like to mess up a dressing room too much. And how would Max Pacioretty take being forced out? Well, obviously, I don't think he would take it very well. I think it would affect his hockey. It's been well documented that Max Pacioretty is one of the players that is protected by Michel Therrien. If you need proof of that, many jokes go around towards the fact that many of Max Pacioretty's goals last year were all empty netters. And, Therrien likes to put him out there when there's an empty net. And unfortunately for Pacioretty, usually he ends up being put out there so he can get his engine going, so he can break a 2, 3, 4, 5 game goalless streak. And coaches will do that. I don't blame Therrien for doing that, to put him out there and, get a goal, and hopefully that'll start him. And sometimes it does, and that's probably why Therrien keeps doing it. However, there's a flip side to that, which is if that's what it always takes to get your player going, well, that's not a good thing, and especially if that player has a C on his chest. I mean, there's 20 other guys on the bench there, and they see their captain being treated like, like he's a bit of a baby. He needs to be helped. He needs to be shoo-shooed, and I'm not the only person reporting this. Max Pacioretty is a bit of that guy, and we saw it in the World Cup when things weren't going as well. He gets that look on his face of, mopiness, and, his body language is very negative, and boy, is that not what you need in a captain. So, that would just be a huge con on Max Pacioretty. I'm hoping and praying that he breaks out of this funk right now and has a great year with the Montreal Canadiens, because that he really needs that. He needs all of us to forget last year, all of us, and possibly, along with Shea Weber, to forget the PK Subban trade. That will always be in the back of everyone's mind next year. And if those two players come out playing really well, PK Subban might be forgotten quickly. We'll see. PK might do quite well in Nashville, so that might be hard, but at least it'll be easier to digest. So, if he's forced to give the captaincy, that would lead to a very bad situation, and I could see him asking for a trade eventually if that bad situation were to snowball. And so that would be a huge con, because that puts the Montreal Canadiens in a situation of losing their principal goal scorer, and we are well known as a team that has trouble putting the puck in the net. So obviously this puts the Montreal Canadiens in a bit of a precarious situation when it comes to their captaincy, because they don't want to throw Max Pacioretty off too much. They want to be supportive of him and everything, but at the same time they would love for Shea Weber to come in and assert his leadership. I really hope they find the balance this year in the dressing room of that. Even if Max has to step aside quite a bit so that Shea Weber exerts that leadership. I hope they cooperate together. Like I said before, I hope Weber becomes an assistant. And if you're the captain, you're supposed to be always talking to your assistants. And I think Max Pacioretty, if he's a smart captain, and I think he is a smart guy, will want Shea Weber as an assistant. And even if he isn't, should tap that resource of leadership and just knowing how to handle people. And that could only be a plus for the Montreal Canadiens. So that should terminate and conclude Max Pacioretty. God, I hope he stays out of the news this week. I really don't want to talk about Max Pacioretty next week. And I really hope he has a great preseason. Max Pacioretty, all the people that have been eliminated at the World Cup, Max Pacioretty, I believe Markov, Emlyn, they're all expected on Tuesday to report to training camp. Of course, Price and Weber are still going. And so that was Max Pacioretty. Who else for captain, that is? The good, the bad, and the ugly. World Cup Edition Part 2. Or for my French listeners, Part 2. It's been a World Cup edition, good, bad, and ugly for the last couple of weeks. I keep needing a spot to put all my World Cup coverage in, and I keep putting it in here, so we'll continue that tradition. I didn't really include a lot of the teams that got eliminated. For all the teams that got eliminated, let's just put them in bad. Okay, the Finlands, the Czech Republic, the so on and so forth. Those that didn't make it to the semifinal, the only team that I'd have a problem putting in the bad would be the North American team that got eliminated. They were exciting, they were fun, and they almost made it through, but they got stopped by a better Russian team. I really hope that we see them again. There's talk that they might not do that again with the under 23 or 24. I really hope they do. So we won't be really looking at team performances. We will be looking at the semifinals, though. The Team Canada versus Team Russia, as well as today we had Europe playing Sweden. So we'll start with the good. And in the good, we find our perennial candidates from the Montreal Canadiens. Shea Weber, I've said very little about him. I've used words like solid, a pillar, manhandler, second most used defenseman. Really, I'm repeating myself now, and it still all stands. So, Shea Weber in the good. Keep it up. Keep it up. To be honest, I asked myself, what are things I can criticize about Shea Weber? And in my first episode, I mentioned that he seemed a little slow. I don't find him very slow anymore. He seems to have adapted quite well with that. Is he unidimensional? Well, he was accused of that at the beginning. But now we see his offense coming in a bit, his shot being a factor. He's starting to get a lot more shots. Let's hope his shot gets even better and better. And nothing but good things to say about Weber. So definitely in the good. And then his compatriot and teammate, Carey Price, of course in the good. Carey Price is getting 60 minutes of hockey, 60 minutes of extremely high-level hockey. And he's playing good goaltending. He's keeping his teams in the game. He's making good saves. I find the goals that are often going in are the typical no-chance goals off the post, goals that should be refused. We'll get into that later. Things that really I can't blame him for letting in. There's times where he might look a little shaky, on a scramble or two or, things like that. But just playing good hockey, getting 60 minutes, and Price is becoming Price again. And, regardless of how shaky or he might look, it's beyond obvious to me that Team Canada, I think, has full confidence in him. I think of the three goalies, they prefer him in front of the net. And I think that's what makes him the number one goalie for Canada. He's just got that confidence, that coolness. That's really important, and he also got ran over a few times, which scared the crap out of me. I won't lie to you. But at the same time, he jumped back up. He looked good. in one instance, he even stopped his players from I think it was in the Team USA game, from going after the player that knocked him over and resulted in a penalty. And, that shows a good amount of leadership on his part. So, Carey Price playing good hockey, great hockey. And we'll keep moving. Team Canada, can't leave them out. The best team in the tournament up to now, and we are at the final. They've been so good that there is not one single team that has played at the level that Canada is playing at the moment. They are lights out at the moment, just lights out. The lines are just silly. The lineup is silly. The defense is silly. And the goaltender is silly. And when that happens and when you're playing good hockey, then it makes the other team look bad. And boy, does Team USA and, on a Team Russia, though they didn't look that bad, they, just a great hockey team playing against them. I have almost nothing bad to say about them. The only thing I will say is imagine if Stamkos was scoring. Here's a player who, you almost forget he's on the team because he hasn't been putting it in the net, but he's been getting 2 to 3 chances a game, excellent chances. And he seems a little snake-bitten. I mean, can you imagine if that guy was putting them in too? We'd be blowing everybody out. I mean, we should be blowing everyone out. If it isn't for some excellent goaltending on the opponent's side, Bobrovsky for the Russians, and, specifically Bobrovsky had a great game. That could have been a blowout against Russia. It was a lot closer than it should have been. So Team Canada, firmly installed in the good, and I don't see that changing in the near future. Move on to Team Europe, who today took out, in huge shocker, and again, Team Europe shocking everyone but me again. This time they took out Sweden. They did so 3-2 in overtime. And Team Europe has basically been playing the same game the entire time, which is trap and counterattack. And Sweden knew it. However, Sweden, I think, made a mistake. Not as big of a mistake as Team USA did against Team Europe. Team USA failed to adapt. Sweden came in with a game plan of locking their defensemen in on defensive play, which, rightly so, would annul the counterattack of Europeans. The Europeans, as you know, like to trap and play a counterattack game. So if your defensemen are playing a conservative game, you've always got 2 guys back there, so there's no odd man rushes. However, we'll discuss it later. I think that negatively impacted the game of Team Sweden. I won't lie to you. I thought the game was boring. I just, there wasn't a lot of action, and it just seemed at times that Sweden wasn't very interested. And again, you got to give it to Team Europe. They're the scrappy underdogs who believe in themselves and who play the way they know how to play and who get results. And I would be neglecting to mention Jaroslav Halak. We all know who he is, playing like we all know he can, especially in games that are super important. I think he almost got 50 shots again. He looked spectacular. And that's great news for Team Europe because I will be frank with you. If Team Europe has any hope of beating Team Canada, they're going to need at least 2 of those performances against Team Canada, if not more. I think Canada still has more than the edge. I think they're an overwhelming favorite. I think it'll be a sweep. But Team Europe deserves to be in the final. I certainly can't say I expected to say that at the end of it. I expected Team Sweden to beat them. I actually expected Sweden to make it to the final. But if I'm being 100% honest, watching Team Sweden play, I don't think they deserve to be there in the final. And I'll get to that in the ugly, where Team Sweden has been firmly implanted by me this week. So, here's another team tidbit about Team Europe that I'd like to share with you. Their coach, we got to give him props to the coach of this team that, devised a strategy and stuck with it and got his players to get on board and seems to be producing and getting results for them. And Ralph Kruger, the coach of Team Europe, a name that perhaps people are not familiar with, and for good reason. Ralph Kruger was, I believe, coach of the Edmonton Oilers for 2 years, and I say that hesitantly. After that, he's never coached in the NHL again, so, a bit of an unknown character here. And, he's obviously done a great job, him and his coaching staff, of getting Team Europe ready, and I bring him up just because I was curious about him, and who is this guy who seems to be doing quite a good job in directing Team Europe to the final. And when people do that, generally they get rehired to coach again in the NHL. So I looked him up, and apparently, to my shock, he's chairman of Southampton Football Club in England. That's right, in the first league in England. And his connection to hockey through this Southampton Football Club is the owner of Southampton is also the owner of a main Division 1 Swiss team. I can't remember which team exactly. And so he still has a connection to hockey and to the Swiss League. And he was approached to coach Team Europe, and he accepted while remaining as chairman of Southampton FC. I say this because I find this fascinating that a hockey person, and he is a hockey person first, was hired by a first division English football club to run their club, essentially. He's the chairman. And what's interesting in this story is he's brought his hockey philosophy over to the first division. When I say that, I mean how an organization is structured. In England, they structure it a little differently than in hockey. Not a little differently, quite differently, I should say. And Southampton decided to give him a chance to restructure their team. And so he built it on the hockey model of investing heavily into scouting and youth development and building a real good farm system. And to his credit, it has produced incredible results for Southampton. Just to give you an idea, last year, Southampton finished at the top of the table. They were behind the two Manchesters, but they were ahead of Arsenal and Liverpool. So obviously he's finding success in the English Football League, while he's moonlighting as a hockey coach in a major hockey tournament. So I find that bit of information quite interesting. Good for him. Good for Team Europe. And we'll see what happens in the final. I'll discuss that in the conclusion of our show. I'll give you my prediction. I kind of think I already did. I am a little biased, but I think I could logically say that, Team Canada's got this. So, moving along on the bad side of the coin, because I think that's enough good. We got to keep moving. I have Max Pacioretty. We discussed him earlier. I'm tired of discussing him, so I'll be quick here. He just plainly continued to suck for Team USA. You're playing on the fourth line. You're not doing anything. Not a good thing. That's all I have to say. I think I've said more than enough on Max Pacioretty, and that's enough of that. Michel Therrien, I'm going to put him in the bad because, once again, when a coach is accused of having said that my captain is the worst captain in our history, you belong in the negative. And the reason I put him in the bad this week is because he last week fully denied what he had said, which last week, and I'll explain this week, I think is a mistake. I think he should have just simply apologized, admitted it, and moved forward. Of course, I believe he said these things. There is the possibility that he didn't. And another reason I have him in the bad, or even in the podcast at all this week, is there's an update on the entire story. The original reporter who broke the story has been fired by his radio station. Now, when I heard that, I thought, oh my God, I've spent half a podcast talking about this, and it's, this guy has ruined his reputation and so on and so forth. So I was pretty upset about that. However, looking into it, I found out that he has been fired for not giving up his sources. Now, that's a totally different story, and journalists, as we all know, are very protective of their sources. Why the radio station wanted to know who these sources were, that could be up for debate. There could be pressure from the Montreal Canadiens. There could be no pressure at all. It's hard to say. Myself personally, I think the radio station probably just wants to make sure that the story is legitimate, since they are being pinpointed as the source of the story. And so they want to double check on that, and he wants to protect his sources. Now, there is even another update to this story, and this involves another reporter at Radio-Canada, which is the French CBC, and his name is Michel Leclerc. And he is basically reporting that he had the exact information as Michel Villeneuve, completely separate from Michel Villeneuve. He hasn't spoken to Michel Villeneuve in years, but he was sitting on this story, gathering the details, and he wrote an article on Tuesday saying that if Michel Villeneuve had not broken the story, he would have. So now it becomes a story of two reporters, and this is important because, like I said last week, he should have admitted it and put to bed, because now you have two reporters, one ex-reporter. There's no doubt in my mind the other reporters are definitely looking for those sources. You have an ex-reporter sitting on sources, probably feeling a bit sore that he just lost his job because of it. This might not end well. This could definitely go sour. And I don't think Montreal Canadiens fans are ready for more bad Michel Therrien news. If we find out that his denial is actually a lie, I don't think the opinion of Michel Therrien could go much lower. No, that's not true. It could go much lower. So there's definitely wiggle room there. So we'll see what happens on that front. But Michel Therrien in the bad. Continuing on in the bad, Team Sweden. As I said, I watched Team Europe beat them today, 3-2 in overtime. And you'll say, wow, they made it to the semifinal. Why are they in the bad? They do belong in the good on certain levels for making it to the semifinal. However, I put them in the bad because I think they could have avoided this loss. I think the strategy they took of locking their defense on defense was a huge mistake. Team Sweden has some of the best offensive players in the league, one of them being Erik Karlsson. And when you tell Erik Karlsson to play defense, I think you're setting yourself up for what happened this afternoon. So I think that was a bit of a mistake. And I watched the game, and Team Sweden at times had problems generating chances, generating offense, breaking the trap. And that is definitely why they are in the bad. They have to let their defense go. Team Sweden is a formidable hockey team when they play that open offensive hockey where you never know if a defenseman's pinching in on that wing or not. And we know how good they pass. And they didn't play that hockey today. And Team Europe's trap took care of business. And that's why they belong in the bad for this week. I will also point out that at times during the game, I mentioned it earlier, I simply found it boring. I mean, I can't blame Team Europe. They have the lesser team on paper. They played a trap. But it was getting to Team Sweden. Team Sweden at times had problems showing effort, emotion. If Team Sweden would have won this game, I would still be predicting a sweep of Team Canada, because I just don't see that intensity, that other level of playing that, for example, Team Canada is on. I mean, Team Canada right now might be 2 levels up. Let's be honest. So Team Sweden they didn't look like they cared at times. And when you lose a hockey game and there's periods of the game that you can point to where it looks like you're not focused, that's why you're in the bad as well. So Team Sweden. As well in the bad this week, and finally, I put the Russian defense in the bad. And of course, this is not good news for Montreal Canadiens fans because Markov and Emelin, had bad games against Team Canada. Again, I hesitate to put them in the bad. I don't want to overstress this because Team Canada right now is, you could have the best defense out there and they would have trouble stopping Canada's offense. So I can't imagine how Markov and Emelin felt back there. However, when you are on the ice for 4 of the 5 goals, you deserve to be mentioned in the bad. As a defensive unit, all 6 players were bad. They were slow. They didn't really contribute to the offense. I found them almost hampering their power play. It was hard to watch because they have such exciting forwards, offensive forwards, that if they had decent or good defensemen that could contribute to their forwards, Team Russia would be a very formidable team. But that's not the case, and Markov and Emelin had a bit of a hard time. Now, they're playing against the best in the world. This isn't the worst news for Hab fans. I mean, it's not the greatest news either, but I'll just throw that out there. And I will also say this about Team Russia as a whole. They, as opposed to Team Sweden, played as if they cared. And for that, kudos. If I could just bring back the good for a second, I would put that aspect in the good. They played like they cared. They played with emotion. When Canada scored, you could tell they didn't like it. They were upset. And kudos for them. That's, Russian players are often accused of not playing with emotion, but it seems lately when they get together and play together, they do play with a bit of emotion. And ironically, that's good news for the Montreal Canadiens because we are developing a bit of a Russian streak on our team. So if they could play with emotion on the Montreal Canadiens as well, the Russians that we have, that would bode well for our future. So that pretty much covers the bad for this week, and we'll move into the ugly. Now, boy, was there some ugly. Let's start with the instant replay at the World Cup. I watch a lot of hockey during the regular season, and of course, when a play goes to instant replay, like most hockey fans, you watch the replay from many angles and slow motions, and you play the game of, is it a goal or not a goal? And I think it's a goal. I don't know. I don't think it's a goal. And I play that game, and usually I'm right when I watch things. You could tell it's a high stick or a kicking motion or something. And you're like, that's not a goal, or However, I have to say for this World Cup, and I bring it up because it is being run by the NHL, so all instant replays are going through the NHL front office, have left me completely perplexed. I watched instant replays where I'm like, there's no way they're going to call that a goal, and I'm not the only one saying that. Every single commentator I've been watching it on TVA, and they all agree there's no way they'll call that a goal. And then the horn goes and they have a face-off. Apparently it is a goal. I have 2 instances here where I'm like, I wrote WTF next to them. The goal Russia-Canada, where the guy basically had his arm in the air. It hit his arm and it went in the net. And I mean, I understand that you need a motion towards the net, but are we at the point where arm pucks are going to count? I saw that and I just was like, that's not a goal. When they counted it, I'm like, well, whatever. It's just whatever. I don't know what to say. It doesn't matter. It was 10 seconds left in the game. It had no impact on the game, but the whole point of instant replay is to get the call right. And if you go through the play and you get the call wrong, then you're wasting everyone's time. And I wish this was the only occurrence. There were others. I'm only going to mention 2. I'm sure there are others, because it seemed all tournament this kept happening, where a play would go under review, we'd see the replay, And to everyone's stupefaction, goals would stand, goals would be called back, interference, this, that, or the other. And the second goal that happened this afternoon, the game winner, Team Europe. Like I mentioned before, for a goal to be refused, there has to be a motion towards the net. And for the game winner in overtime for Team Europe, the guy kicked it in. There's just no other way to put it. He kicked it in. I saw the replay. I said, well, if you read the law, there's no way they can accept this. And sure enough, they accepted it. If I was Sweden, I would be pretty damn upset. Sweden's upset about their play right now. But that was another goal where I'm just like, I don't get it. I just don't get it. And I'm really hoping this is just preseason jitters on the front of the NHL front office. They tell us this tournament's important. If it's that important, the outcry would be bigger about instant replay failing. Up to now, I have heard very little about it. So definitely an ugly. The instant replay crew of the World Cup organization, ugly. Bad job, guys. Let's move on the ugly, because there's a couple more. And I'm reserving this one for the TVA play-by-play. Now, as I said earlier, I watch the games on TVA, the French channel that covers the World Cup. I don't get Sportsnet, so I can't watch it in English. I think I'd still watch TVA. I don't really have a problem with them. Well, up until now. They're getting better and better on their coverage, and they'll only get better. But boy, did they piss me off during the Canada-Russia game. There's over 3 minutes left. They started at about 3.5 minutes left in the game, and Canada was up 5-2. All of them on the play-by-play, including the play-by-play guy, the color commentator, started talking about how the game was over. 5-2. That's a 3-goal deficit with 3.5 minutes left, and the game was over. Upset me at first. I was like, the game's not over. You have a Russian team stocked with players, exactly the kind of players that could bury 3 goals on you in 30 seconds. So just shut up. Stop it. However, my anger continued to rise as the time kept elapsing. 3 minutes, 2 minutes, where they couldn't stop talking about the fact that the Russians had no chance to come back. This game was over. We were just going through a regular ceremony. I mean, hockey people know the game is never over. It is such a fast game. And when you pull your goalie and you have a man advantage and you're trying to play for your life to continue on in a big tournament, the game is never over. And for them to spend about 3 minutes talking about how a game is over just pissed me off. And they get a big fat ugly for that. They should know better. Obviously, part of me was like, if Team Canada, obviously I didn't want Team Russia to score 3 goals and come back and tie us just to teach some stupid announcers some lesson. But if that would have happened, at least I might not be the only one talking about this now, because then those 3 minutes of them talking about how the game was over might have bitten them in the ass. And, karmically it should have, but let's all be very, very thankful it didn't. So a big ugly for that. You should know better. And stop talking about shutouts at the end of the game in case you don't friggin' know. Let's move on in the ugly. The last ugly I reserved for Team USA. They've been a perennial fan in my ugly. As Max Pacioretty's been floating between ugly and bad. Tortorella, ugly. He's had a tough tournament as well. But the reason I put them in the ugly was I want to talk about, and maybe he belongs, forget Team USA, but Phil Kessel. Now, the last 2 podcasts I've been saying that the US team could use Phil Kessel. They were lacking a lot of offense, and Phil Kessel is exactly that. And after Team USA lost to Team Canada, Phil Kessel tweeted along the lines of, I know I had something important to do, but I can't quite remember what it is. Something like that. Basically alluding the fact that he should have been in the game and wasn't. Well, Phil, if you're wondering why you weren't picked, there it is right there. And, you know, I still think Team USA could have used his skill and talent. However, I completely defend the fact that they didn't pick this a-hole. And it's turning out that Mr. Kessel has a terrible reputation for all the reasons that have been declared in the past. He's only confirming the fact that he probably is a player that if he was not on the Pittsburgh Penguins, would be a pariah, would probably be traded soon. He might stay on Pittsburgh for a while. We'll see, but we'll see if he, poisons that dressing room. But I think Phil Kessel showed us that, this category that I call ugly, well, maybe he should be a permanent resident. Phil Kessel, just being an ugly person. Let's move on to Montreal Canadian news, which I think I'm going to start calling the weekly Habitant, where I'll basically be covering all the news that I haven't yet, that doesn't have its own category, just news bits. So the weekly Habitant, welcome. So training camp is starting, as I reported earlier on. It started this weekend, and already we've had a few intra-squad games, the good old red versus white games, as they're called. To give you an idea of how media crazy this town is, I didn't see it I don't know if it was on TV, but it was on the radio. So I got to listen to it on the radio while I was doing some errands, and kudos to the commentators trying to put emotion into a game, pretty much a scrimmage game, which it just felt odd, but nice try. I bring this up because there isn't much to report except for the fact that Radulov has been turning some heads, and that's always good news. Radulov scored a couple of goals. He's looking good out there. He's standing out. He's got skill. And, for the Montreal Canadiens to be successful this year, I spoke about Pacioretty needing to score. Radulov needs to have a good year. We hope we're going to get a lot of good things from him, but I think no one knows for sure, right? We're thinking good thoughts, though. So good start for him, apparently, in the intra-game squad, and I'm reporting that. Last week, I forgot to report a piece of news that I'll report this week. The Montreal Canadiens hired a new analytics person to study advanced statistics. And as we know in hockey, there are hundreds of statistics. This is important because the last analytics guy of the Montreal Canadiens made a bit of news because he was against the PK Subban trade. He made a presentation to the Montreal Canadiens that showed, according to his advanced statistics, that we were losing that trade. Now, obviously, the Montreal Canadiens, I don't know, either ignored him or found other values that put Weber in their favor, and they promptly fired the guy, which, of course, raised quite a few eyebrows. You don't agree with the Montreal Canadiens and you're shown the door. Now, ironically, a lot of people said maybe this guy was incompetent and maybe he wasn't a good analytics guy. However, weeks later, he was hired by Hockey Canada. So, that kind of buried those excuses. If Hockey Canada thinks he's good enough, well, maybe there is something to that. But the Montreal Canadiens were left without an analytics guy, and it was unclear if they were even going to hire another one. I thought that was a mistake. All stats are good stats, especially if that's your life. So they hired a new guy. I don't know his name. I'm sorry. I don't have it here, and my computer's been turned off, as I explained earlier. So math is back. Math is back for the Montreal Canadiens. And in other news, new stamps are out. I know it's not a piece of news that's very interesting. I'm not a stamp collector myself, so I really don't care all that much. But Canada Post has released 6 legends in a stamp collection, and they are as follows. I think the theme is some of Canada's top scorers of all time. And we have Phil Esposito, we have Darryl Sittler, Mark Messier, Steve Yzerman, Sidney Crosby, and Guy Lafleur. Now, the reason I bring this up is because a couple of things caught my eye. First of all, I think they released this because none of these people have been on stamps before. Now, I could be wrong. I was thinking I should start researching it, maybe get the answer myself, but I'm too lazy, so I won't do that, and I really don't care that much. But maybe these guys haven't all been on stamps. I mean, if you're talking about the top scorers of all time, I mean, Lemieux and Gretzky aren't even in there. So, 2 omissions. I know Gretzky's had his own stamp. I'm not sure about Lemieux. I think he has too. So, and of course, Mr. Hockey himself, Gordie Howe, left off as well. I think he's definitely been on a stamp. So I think maybe this is one of those series where they're like, let's take 6 guys who we haven't put on stamps yet that, deserve their stamps. I also bring this up because I think this is the first time we've had an active hockey player being honored by Canada Post, and that's, of course, Sidney Crosby. So I bring that up as a tidbit. Not a Tim Hortons tidbit, but a tidbit. And, of course, Guy Lafleur. Pretty good show today. Ended up being longer than I thought, a little more content than I thought, so I'm happy about that. I think this conclusion, I'll focus a little more on what might happen between Team Europe and Team Canada. I covered it a little bit in the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's 10 o'clock right now at night on Sunday, so I'm actually going to be posting this a bit late. Usually I like to get it in on Sunday afternoon. The goal is always to get it out for Monday morning, though. That's how I'd like to see it. That's a nice weekly schedule. It allows me to watch a lot of hockey over the weekends. A lot of things happen in the hockey world over the weekend. So, I'm aiming for every Monday morning. You can expect a new podcast from me, hopefully. So today's a little late. But as far as World Cup predictions, let's be honest. Team Canada is going to sweep this 2-0. I think Halak has too much on his plate here. For Montreal Canadian fans, it'll be fun to have that Halak versus Price storyline going. But all the pressure is on Halak. If he doesn't stop 50 shots each game, they have no chance. And not only that, for those who are unfamiliar with the World Cup final, how it's going to be broken down, it's a best of 3. So the first game's Tuesday, second game's Thursday, and the third game, if needed, is on Saturday. And in my humble opinion, that is horrible news for Team Europe. I'm sure they would much rather a sudden death kind of situation. Let's sneak one out and win this tournament. The fact that Halak is probably going to have to come up with performances that are just unbelievable in 2 games, not 1, but 2, I think is just too much to ask for Team Europe to somehow beat Team Canada. Team Europe, likes to play a trap, and Team Canada is rolling 4 incredible offensive lines, and I think Team Canada is going to break through Team Europe. We've already seen them play, so I'm not talking what I think. This has already happened, which is, in my opinion, an advantage to Canada. They know it's coming. They can make small adjustments. Team Europe basically at this point has a tsunami coming at them, a massive wave, and I hope it's great hockey. I even hope I want Team Canada to win, no doubt about it. But I'm also worried that Team Canada might blow them out in at least one of the games. If Halak drops the ball in one of the games or has a mediocre game, God forbid. So a lot of pressure on Halak. Price, pressure too, but less. And, good for Price. He'll be in the final. He'll get 2 more games under his belt, as will Weber. There's a case to be made after such a bad injury that Carey Price might be coming into training camp in some of the best form he might be ever have been in. I mean, I'll let him say it. But when you play with the best and practice with the best for the last almost a month now, that's great news for the Habs. I think Canada's going to wipe the floor with Team Europe. It'll be quick, it'll be sweet, and they'll win the tournament. As far as the tournament itself, I think I'm going to talk about that next week. There's been a bit of talk now that the tournament's in the final about what's going to happen in the next following years, whether they'll go to the Olympics or not, or continue this tournament, or do both, or do neither. It seems every option's on the table. Of course, some options have more of a chance of happening than others, but I think we'll discuss that next week and look back at the World Cup and, give an opinion on what we thought of all that. I will prelude it by saying, just off the top of my head, I found it really weird to watch hockey that I'm supposed to care about in September. I can't remember ever watching hockey in September and being told this is uber important. This isn't the first time they've had this sort of World Cup or Canada Cup or some cup. And usually it would happen in the middle of the season or at the end of the season. Doing it at the beginning of the season has been a new experience. And I know we did pros and cons earlier. Might have to do it for this too, because there were definitely some pros and definitely some cons for doing it in September. And as just a hockey fan, people in September are enjoying the last sun of the fall. It's getting cold at night, and sure, they might start thinking about hockey. Preseason camps are opening, but to actually be like, go Canada, go! We have to win. This matters so much. It hasn't been easy to get into. I won't lie to you. It's breaking a lifetime of habit to be cheering and caring about hockey in September. No doubt it's helped a lot that the Montreal Canadiens have had a very good representation on the World Cup rosters. We've had 5 players playing, and so we've been able to get a little look at them before everything starts. So that's definitely been fun. So I think we'll end it here. I think we've gone long enough, and I'd like to take this chance to wish everyone a fantastic week. I want to wish Canada the best of luck against Team Europe, even though I think we've got this. Wish Carey Price great game. Shea Weber, keep it up. Team Canada, keep rolling. Just keep rolling. Good Lord. Every single one of you. Keep playing the way you're playing. And that'll be it for this week's podcast. See you all next week. This is the Angry Habs Fan Podcast Show.